The sun warmed Ben's back as he patted down another tower, smoothing the wet sand with the back of his hand. This wasn't just any sandcastle. This was going to be the most magnificent sandcastle the beach had ever seen. He'd been working since sunrise, carefully crafting walls, digging a deep moat, and even sculpting tiny flags from seaweed. Almost perfect, he murmured, adding a delicate seashell to the highest turret. Beside him, Lily, his best friend, was attempting to help, but her attention drifted easily. She'd start building a wall, then spot a particularly shiny shell and abandon her work to chase after it. "Lily, could you maybe focus on the moat?" Ben asked, trying not to sound annoyed. Lily, already halfway down the beach, paused, a handful of pearly shells glittering in her palm. "But Ben, look at these. This one's striped and this one. It's perfectly pink. They're way more interesting than digging." She grinned, and Ben couldn't help but smile back. Lily always found wonder in the smallest things. He turned back to his castle, meticulously adding details. He was determined to finish it before the tide came in. He'd chosen his spot carefully, but the ocean always seemed to creep closer than you expected. A gruff voice startled him.
"Jure bielding mich die close to the water, let. Mich die close."
Ben looked up to see Mr. Grumbles, the old fisherman, standing over him, his face weathered like driftwood. Mr. Grumbles wasn't known for his friendly disposition. He usually just sat on his stool, casting his line and muttering to himself. "I know, sir," Ben replied politely, "but I think I have plenty of time. The tide's going out for a little while yet." Mr. Grumbles snorted.
"Don't you believe it? The sea does what it wants.
Always has, always will. You build that close, it'll be gone with the next wave.
Mark my words."
He shook his head and turned to walk away, then paused. "Waste of good sand, if you ask me." Ben ignored the grumpy fisherman and continued building. He didn't believe in bad omens, and he certainly didn't want to think about his castle being washed away. He was too busy imagining himself as the king of his sandy kingdom, defending it from imaginary dragons and mischievous sea sprites. Hours passed, the sun climbed higher, and the castle grew grander. Finally, just as Ben was adding the final touches, a tiny drawbridge made of a smooth, flat stone, he noticed the tide beginning to turn. It was coming in, slowly but surely. He braced himself, expecting the inevitable crash of waves against his creation. But something strange happened. The waves rolled closer and closer, and then stopped. Not with a crash, not with a splash, but as if an invisible wall had risen from the sea.
"The water hovered just inches from the castle walls, as if hesitant to disturb it." Ben starred, Mut agape.
He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and looked again. The tide was still, held back by an unseen force. He glanced at Mr. Grumbles, who was watching with a puzzled frown. Lily, having finished her seashell collection, came running back, her eyes wide with surprise.
What's happening?" she breathed.
Ben didn't have an answer. He just knew, with a thrilling certainty, that this was no ordinary sandcastle. The first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Ben, unable to sleep a wink, had raced back to the beach as soon as he could. He expected to find his sandcastle exactly as he'd left it, perhaps a little damp from the halted tide. What he found instead made his jaw drop.
It wasn't a Sandcastle anymore.
It was a castle. A real castle, though miniature, standing proudly against the morning light. The sand had solidified, forming sturdy stone walls, complete with towering turrets and fluttering banners. Tiny windows glowed with a warm, inviting light. And it wasn't empty. Little knights, no bigger than Ben's thumb, marched back and forth across the courtyard, their miniature armor gleaming. A friendly-looking dragon, scales shimmering emerald green, sunned itself on the highest tower, occasionally puffing out a tiny plume of smoke. The air buzzed with a quiet, cheerful energy.
"Woa!" Ben breathed, stepping closer.
Suddenly, a knight in shining armor, with a particularly impressive mustache, strode towards him. He stopped just before Ben's feet, straightened his tiny sword, and spoke in a surprisingly booming voice. "Greetings. By order of His Royal Majesty, King Ben I, You are hereby summoned to the throne room."
"King me."
Ben stammered, utterly bewildered. "Indeed." The knight, who introduced himself as Sir Reginald, replied with a crisp salute.
"The enchantment is complete."
"You are our king." Before Ben could process this, a blur of green swooped down from the tower, landing playfully on his shoulder. It was the dragon, and it nudged his cheek with its snout. "Hello," the dragon chirped, its voice full of mischievous glee. "I'm Sparky.
"Welcome to your castle."
It's gonna be so much fun." Sparky proceeded to blow a tiny ring of smoke that smelled faintly of marshmallows.
Ben lauket, a genuine, joyful sound.
He was being led into the castle by Sir Reginald, Sparky flitting around his head, when he spotted Lily running towards them.
"Ben, I don't believe it."
Lily exclaimed, her eyes wide with amazement as she took in the miniature kingdom.
It's incredible."
She cautiously approached the castle walls, peering into the bustling courtyard. But her expression quickly shifted from wonder to concern. "Ben," she said, her voice quieter now, "look at the sand around the castle.
It's different."
It's really hard, and it doesn't feel like regular beach sand anymore." She knelt down and picked up a handful, letting it trickle through her fingers.
"It's almost stone-like."
Ben hadn't noticed. He was too caught up in the excitement of being a king. But Lily's words struck a chord of unease. He looked around, and she was right. The natural golden sand of the beach seemed to be receding, replaced by a harder, greyish substance that radiated from the castle walls. Sir Reginald, overhearing their conversation, cleared his throat importantly.
"A necessary consequence of the enchantment, my dear."
The castle requires strong foundations, naturally. It is a small price to pay for the glory of the kingdom. Sparky, oblivious to the growing tension, simply zoomed around Lily, blowing tiny bubbles. Ben, now officially crowned King Ben I in a surprisingly comfortable miniature crown, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Being a king was amazing, but at what cost? The throne, surprisingly comfortable despite being crafted from smoothed sandstone, felt less like a seat of power and more like a very elaborate beach chair. Ben sighed, adjusting the miniature crown that kept slipping over his eyes. Being King Ben I wasn't quite the carefree adventure he'd imagined.
"Your Majesty, Sir Reginald boomed, Statling Ben."
The knight stood ramrod straight before him, a tiny scroll clutched in his gauntlet. "We have a dispute. Sir Boris claims Sir Clarence stole his miniature polishing cloth. Accusations of treason have been leveled."
Ben blinked.
"A polishing cloth? Treason?"
"Indeed. A Knichts Amor must gleam, Your Majesty."
"It is a matter of honor, and therefore of the kingdom," Sir Reginald insisted, puffing out his chest. Ben glanced at Sparky, who was currently attempting to use one of the castle towers as a scratching post.
Maybe they can just share?"
Sir Reginald looked horrified. "Share? A king does not suggest sharing when matters of honor are at stake. A formal duel is required, Your Majesty. With miniature swords, of course."
"No duels."
Ben protested. This was ridiculous. He missed building sandcastles, where the biggest problem was a collapsing tower. Tell Sir Boris and Sir Clarence to apologize and each buy their own polishing cloth.
"From the castle stores."
Sir Reginald sputtered. "But the protocol."
"The tradition."
"We're making new traditions," Ben said firmly, though his voice wobbled slightly. He was the king, wasn't he? He could make new traditions. The day continued in a similar vein. A complaint about the dragon's smoke interfering with the flag signals. A request for a larger banquet hall, apparently, miniature feasts were proving cramped. And a very urgent plea for more sand. "Your Majesty," Sir Reginald said, looking particularly stressed, "the western wall requires reinforcement. The enchantment is consuming the sand at an alarming rate. We need more, and quickly." Ben frowned. He'd noticed the sand around the castle dwindling, but hadn't fully grasped the implications. "How much more?"
"A considerable amount, Your Majesty."
"Enough to fill, well, a rather large bucket." "A large bucket?" Ben repeated, feeling a knot form in his stomach. He looked out at the beach. It seemed smaller than yesterday. Just then, a panicked shout erupted from the courtyard.
Sparky! No!
The flags. Ben rushed outside to find Sparky happily attempting to redecorate the castle walls with a plume of brightly colored smoke. Unfortunately, the smoke was also coating the carefully arranged flag signals, rendering them unreadable.
Sparky!
Ben exclaimed, trying not to sound too exasperated.
But it makes them pretty.
Sparky chirped, tilting his head. Pretty isn't helpful when we need to send messages to the neighboring kingdoms of Seashell and Driftwood, Sir Reginald muttered darkly. Ben took a deep breath. He couldn't just order Sparky to stop being Sparky. Okay, Sparky, he said, thinking quickly. How about you use your smoke to make pictures around the flags?
Like a dragon blowing bubbles.
Sparky's eyes lit up.
Oh, bubbles. I love bubbles.
And with a happy squeal, he began creating swirling, colorful smoke bubbles around the flag tower. As Ben watched Sparky's antics, a wave of exhaustion washed over him. Being king wasn't about grand adventures and easy decisions. It was about endless complaints, impossible requests, and trying to manage a tiny kingdom with a very chaotic dragon. He sat down heavily on the steps of the castle, feeling utterly overwhelmed. He missed the simple joy of building a sandcastle, a joy that now felt very, very far away. He wondered if he was even a good king. The next morning, Ben awoke to a castle that had grown. Not just a little, but significantly. A new wing had sprouted, complete with a shimmering, sand-crystal ballroom, and the towers were taller, reaching towards the sky like ambitious fingers. Sparky was already zooming around the new additions, leaving trails of glittery sand dust in his wake.
Magnificent, ihr seid it, your majesty.
Sir Reginald declared, beaming with pride.
A testament to your glorious Reichen. Ben forced a smile.
It was magnificent, but a growing unease settled in his stomach. He looked beyond the castle walls, towards the ocean. The beach was smaller, noticeably smaller. Where yesterday the waves had gently lapped a good 10 feet from the castle base, today they crashed much closer, leaving only a narrow strip of sand. Sir Reginald, Ben began hesitantly, has anyone noticed? The beach is getting smaller? Sir Reginald waved a dismissive hand.
A meiner Inconvenience, your majesty.
A small price to pay for such grandeur. The enchantment requires sand, and sand it shall have. But where is the sand going? It is integrating, your majesty, becoming one with the castle, strengthening its foundations. Ben wasn't convinced. He walked to the edge of the remaining beach, his toes sinking into the damp sand. It felt different, denser somehow. He remembered the soft, powdery texture from just days ago. He scanned the shoreline. Fewer seagulls wheeled overhead, and the usual scattering of colorful seashells was conspicuously absent. Just then, Lily came running towards him, her face etched with worry.
Ben, have you seen?
The beach is disappearing. I've been looking for shells, and there are hardly any left. And Old Man Hemlock, the seagull who always sits on that rock, he's gone. She pointed to a smooth, grey rock now almost surrounded by water. Sir Reginald says it's just a small price to pay, Ben mumbled, feeling helpless. Lily's brow furrowed.
A small price?
Ben, this beach is important. It's where everyone comes to play, to collect shells, to just be. You can't just let it disappear for a castle. Before Ben could respond, Sir Reginald cleared his throat importantly. Your Majesty, the Royal Council requests an audience. They have suggestions for further expansion. Ben groaned inwardly. Suggestions? Indeed. Lord Bartholomew believes a grand observatory is essential for charting the constellations. Lady Beatrice insists on a royal garden, complete with sandroses. And I, of course, have proposed a significantly larger armory. Sir Reginald puffed out his chest again.
More Sand?
Ben asked, his voice barely a whisper.
Naturally, your majesty.
A larger armory requires a larger foundation. A royal garden needs fertile sand soil. And an observatory, well, it simply must be built on the highest tower. The requests kept coming, each one bigger and more extravagant than the last. Ben found himself agreeing to things he didn't want to, feeling pressured by the knight's unwavering belief in the castle's importance. He wanted to say no to protect the beach, but Sir Reginald was so insistent, and the knights seemed to expect his unwavering support. As the day wore on, the castle continued to grow, relentlessly consuming the sand around it. Mr. Grumbles, the grumpy fisherman, stood on the last remaining stretch of dry sand, shaking his fist at the castle.
It's a monster, Italia.
A sand-gobbling monster, he shouted, his voice raspy with indignation. Stealing our beach bit by bit.
Mark my words, it'll be the end of us all.
Ben watched him, a wave of guilt washing over him. He was king, and his decisions were causing this. He'd started building a sandcastle for fun, but it had become something else, something dangerous. He looked at Lily, her eyes filled with sadness, and knew he had to do something. But what?
The relentless growth continue through the day, a silent sanditide consuming the beach.
Ben watched, horrified, as familiar landmarks disappeared. Old Man Tiber's favorite sunbathing rock, the patch of seaweed where the hermit crabs gathered, even the small dunes Lily used to roll down, all swallowed by the ever-expanding castle. The line where the sand met the sea was now a mere sliver, a fragile promise of what once was. Mr. Grumbles, true to his word, was a whirlwind of frustrated energy. He'd gathered driftwood and seaweed, attempting to construct a makeshift barrier, a desperate plea to halt the castle's advance. Ben watched, a knot forming in his throat, as the castle simply absorbed it. The driftwood seemed to melt into the sand walls, the seaweed becoming intricate, decorative patterns in the newly formed towers. It was as if the castle wanted to grow, and nothing could stop it. It's no use, Mr. Grumbles bellowed, throwing his hands up in defeat. It just takes and takes. That castle's got a hunger for this beach, and it ain't gonna stop till there's nothing left. He slumped onto a piece of driftwood, looking utterly defeated. Ben walked towards him, wanting to offer comfort, but words failed him. He felt responsible, utterly and completely. Had created this, and now it was destroying the place he loved. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them. Sparky, sensing Ben's sadness, swooped down, attempting a playful loop-de-loop. He blew a puff of glittery sand, intending to create a sparkling rainbow, but misjudged the wind. Instead, the sand landed directly on the castle's outer wall, and with a soft rumble, another turret sprang up, taller and more ornate than the last. Ben stared, aghast.
Sparky. No.
Sparky landed clumsily, his usually bright eyes filled with confusion. But, I was trying to make you happy, Your Majesty. Rainbows are happy. I know, Sparky, Ben said, forcing a smile. But you just made the castle bigger. Oh. Sparky's wings drooped.
Too much sparkle.
Lily, who had been silently observing, put a hand on Ben's shoulder. It's not your fault, Sparky. It's the castle. It's like it has a mind of its own. Ben looked at the castle, now looming over them like a golden behemoth. It did feel that way. It wasn't just a structure of sand anymore, it was something, alive and consuming. He noticed the few remaining seagulls had flown away, their cries echoing in the distance. The air, once filled with the scent of salt and sea, now smelled faintly of sandstone. He knelt down, picking up a handful of the remaining sand. It was coarse and dry, lacking the familiar smoothness he remembered. It felt wrong. This isn't right, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. This beach, it's not supposed to be like this. He looked at Lily, his eyes pleading for help. I have to do something, but I don't know what. Lily squeezed his shoulder. We'll figure it out, Ben. Together. But as Ben looked out at the vanishing shoreline, a cold dread settled in his heart. He had a terrible feeling that figuring it out wouldn't be easy, and that the fate of the beach, and perhaps everything he held dear, rested solely on his shoulders. The weight of the shrinking beach pressed down on Ben, heavier than any crown. He sat on the highest turret of the castle, the wind whipping around him, and stared at the ever-encroaching waves. The remaining strip of sand looked pitiful, a pale crescent moon against the vastness of the ocean. He was King Ben I, ruler of a magnificent kingdom, yet he felt utterly powerless. "Your Majesty seems troubled," a crisp voice announced. Sir Reginald, impeccably polished armor gleaming in the sunlight, stood rigidly beside him. "Might I remind you of your royal duties? The West Wing requires a new observation tower, and the knights are petitioning for a grander mess hall." Ben sighed.
Sir Reginald, look around.
"Do you see how small the beach is getting? The castle is taking everything." Sir Reginald sniffed dismissively.
A small sacrifice for unparalleled grandeur, your majesty.
"A kingdom such as this deserves to expand, to showcase its magnificence. It is your duty as king to allow it to flourish."
"But at what cost?"
Ben retorted, frustration creeping into his voice. "There won't be a beach left. No place for Lily to collect shells, no rocks for Mr. Grumbles to sunbathe on. Just endless Sandcastle." "Sentimentality, your majesty," Sir Reginald declared, his voice unwavering.
"A king must think of the kingdom first, not fleeting pleasures."
He paused, then added, "Besides, the castle provides shelter and prosperity to its inhabitants. Surely that outweighs the loss of a little sand?" Ben shook his head, unable to argue with such unwavering logic. He knew Sir Reginald wasn't malicious, just devoted to the idea of a perfect kingdom, regardless of the consequences. Leaving Sir Reginald to his duties, Ben sought out Lily. He found her hunched over a pile of books in the castle courtyard, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Lily," he said softly, have you found anything?" Lily looked up, her eyes tired but hopeful. "I've been going through Old Man Tiber's collection of beach folklore." He had a whole shelf dedicated to local legends. She held up a worn, leather-bound book. "And I think I found something.
A legend about a Sea shell, the Shell of Whispers.
It's said to possess the power to reverse enchantments, to restore what's been lost." Ben's heart leaped with hope. "Really?
Where is it?
Can we find it?" "The legend doesn't say exactly where it is," Lily admitted, her voice laced with caution. "It just says it appears to those who truly need it, where the land meets the sea and the whispers of the ocean hold the key." Ben frowned. "That doesn't exactly narrow it down." "I know, but it's a start. And I also found something about the source of the castle's magic. Apparently, it's tied to the beach itself, to its natural energy. The more sand the castle consumes, the stronger it gets, but the more it disrupts the balance of the ocean." Suddenly, a gruff voice interrupted them.
"Humph."
So, the little king finally realized he's causing trouble. It was Mr. Grumbles, looking less grumpy than usual, almost concerned. Ben was surprised to see him.
"Mr. Grumbles?
What are you doing here?" "Came to see if you'd finally come to your senses," the old fisherman replied, shuffling his feet. "Heard you talkin' about a seashell. Fool's errand most likely, but better than sittin' around watchin' my beach disappear." He paused, then looked directly at Ben. "Look, kid, I didn't like your castle at first, thought it was just showing off. But I see now, you didn't mean for this to happen. You gotta fix it. Even if it means losing your fancy kingdom." Ben met Mr. Grumble's gaze, a surge of determination filling him. He looked from Lily's hopeful face to Sir Reginald's disapproving glare, and finally back at the dwindling shoreline.
"The Quase was clear."
"I'm going to find that seashell," he declared, his voice firm. "And I'm going to restore the beach, even if it means giving up everything." The quest for the Shell of Whispers began at the castle gates, now guarded by two stone-faced knights.
"Halt."
"No one leaves the castle without the king's express permission." One boomed, his voice echoing off the sandbrick walls. Ben exchanged a look with Lily. "We need to get past them," he whispered. "But how?" Just then, a shadow fell over them, and a playful roar filled the air. Sparky, the miniature dragon, swooped down, circling the knights' heads and blowing harmless puffs of smoke. "Oh, it's just the king's pet lizard," one knight scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Let them pass. Though I still maintain this whole seashell business is a waste of royal time." Sparky landed gently on Ben's shoulder, nuzzling his cheek. "Follow me," he chirped, taking flight and leading them through a maze of newly constructed towers and winding corridors. The castle seemed to actively resist their progress, hallways shifting and doorways appearing and disappearing. Sparky, however, navigated it with ease, his playful energy somehow disrupting the castle's rigid structure. "This place is getting bigger by the minute," Lily exclaimed, dodging a falling pile of sand blocks. "It's like it's trying to trap us." "It is," Ben replied grimly. "The more we try to undo the magic, the more it fights back." Finally, Sparky led them to a hidden opening in the castle wall, overlooking what was once a wide, sandy cove. Now, only a sliver of beach remained, lapped by increasingly agitated waves. In the center of the cove, nestled amongst a cluster of jagged rocks, lay a shell, shimmering with an ethereal glow. "There it is," Lily breathed, pointing.
The shell of whispers.
But their path was blocked. Standing between them and the cove was Sir Reginald, his armor gleaming menacingly in the fading sunlight. "You will not proceed, Your Majesty," he declared, his voice cold and unwavering.
"This is madness. You are about to dismantle a masterpiece, a testament to your glory."
"Do you not understand the responsibility that comes with being king?" "I do, Sir Reginald," Ben said, his voice firm despite his trembling hands. "And my responsibility is to protect this beach, not to bury it under a mountain of sand. This castle, it's not worth the cost." "You are being foolish," Sir Reginald insisted, drawing his miniature sword. "This castle is more than just sand and stone. It is a symbol of power, of order, of civilization. To destroy it is to destroy everything we have built."
"It's not civilization if it destroys the natural world," Lily interjected, stepping forward. "Look around you, Sir Reginald.
"The beach is disappearing.
The birds are gone."
"Where's the beauty in that?" Sir Reginald ignored her, his focus solely on Ben. "As your loyal knight, I cannot allow you to commit this act of sacrilege." He lunged, his sword aimed at Ben's chest. Before Ben could react, Sparky swooped in, knocking Sir Reginald off balance with a well-aimed gust of wind. "Leave him alone," the dragon roared, surprisingly fierce. Taking advantage of the distraction, Ben and Lily raced towards the cove. Ben carefully picked up the shell of whispers. It was warm to the touch, and a faint melody seemed to emanate from within. "What do we do?" Lily asked, her voice filled with anticipation. Ben closed his eyes, remembering the legend.
"Sing to the sea, and let the whispers guide you."
He took a deep breath and began to sing, a simple, heartfelt melody, pouring all his regret and hope into the song. As he sang, the shell began to glow brighter, and the melody grew stronger, resonating with the rhythm of the waves. A visible wave of energy pulsed outwards, washing over the castle. The sand began to shift, the towers to crumble, and the vibrant colors to fade. The castle wasn't collapsing violently, but unraveling, returning to its original form grain by grain. The song continued, a gentle tide of sound washing over the shrinking kingdom. Ben kept his eyes closed, clinging to the shell of whispers, feeling the magic flow out of the castle and back into the sand. It wasn't a destructive process, more like a gentle undoing. The once imposing towers softened, their sharp edges rounding. The bustling courtyards quieted, the tiny figures of knights and villagers becoming less defined. As the last vestiges of enchantment faded, Ben opened his eyes. The miniature castle was shrinking, not with a crash, but with a sigh. It was becoming a sandcastle again. A remarkably detailed sandcastle, certainly, but just a sandcastle nonetheless. Sir Reginald, now looking considerably less stern and more sandy, stood before him, his miniature sword drooping. It appears my duty is concluded, Your Majesty," he said, his voice subdued. "It was an honor serving you." Sparky landed on Ben's head, his scales shimmering with a final burst of magical light. "It was fun while it lasted," he chirped, a hint of sadness in his voice. "Don't forget to dream of dragons, okay? We'll visit." Ben smiled, stroking Sparky's head. "I won't. And thank you, Sparky.
You were a great friend."
One by one, the knights offered their farewells, their voices filled with a mixture of regret and acceptance. They faded into the sand, becoming part of the beach once more. With a final, wistful glance at the dissolving kingdom, Ben carefully placed the shell of whispers back amongst the rocks. The glow subsided, leaving only a smooth, pearly surface. He removed the small, ornate crown that had rested on his head, the weight of kingship suddenly feeling insignificant. He handed it to Lily. "Keep it," he said, "as a reminder." Lily turned it over in her hands, a thoughtful expression on her face. A reminder that even the most amazing things sometimes need to go back to how they were. Looking around, Ben saw a remarkable transformation. The beach had returned, wider and more vibrant than he remembered. The waves crashed gently against the shore, and seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries echoing in the fresh sea air. Wildflowers were pushing their way through the sand, reclaiming their territory. Old Mr. Grumbles, who had been observing the entire scene from a distance, shuffled closer. He didn't say anything, but a tiny, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. It was the biggest smile Ben had ever seen on the old fisherman's face. Together, Ben and Lily began to rebuild. Not a grand castle this time, but a small, simple structure. A few towers, a modest moat, and a winding path leading to a tiny flag. They worked in comfortable silence, enjoying the feel of the cool, damp sand between their fingers. "You know," Lily said after a while, "this is much better. It's real." Ben nodded, shaping a small turret with his hands. "It is. It's not about being king, or having power. It's about appreciating what we already have." He looked out at the vast ocean, the sun warming his face. "It's about protecting the things that matter." As they finished their sandcastle, Ben realized something profound. He hadn't lost a kingdom, he had gained something far more valuable. A deeper understanding of the world around him, and a newfound appreciation for the simple beauty of a natural beach. And that, he knew, was a treasure worth more than all the sand in the world.